Please join me in welcoming Shad Deering.
The hella grade, elevated skills we celebrate. Practice, kid, I've been this ill since 7th grade. I dedicate this to my sis and the crew. And thanks for coming out, but the competition is through. I can tell.
So good morning. That's a military thing. We do that. We get responses. So that's either the best walk-up music ever, or it's really too loud, because I saw you all last night at the casino. And I will say, as opposed to a lot of the meetings I go to where we're starting at 7 a.m., they are really nice to you here, starting at 9. I mean, this is nice. This is good. So today I want to talk to you about why I sim. And so if you see the thing behind me, we actually came up with that. And so I'm just going to explain it up front, so you're not looking at it trying to figure out what it is. So there's a W for why, there's an I, and there's an S. Now, just in case anybody didn't catch that, my name is Shad. It's okay if you mess it up. I will turn around to anything that is close. My wife called me Chad for the first month that we dated. I corrected her the first time, and she didn't get it, and so I just let it go. And about a month later, my brother was visiting, and he just goes to her and he goes, "You know his name's Shad, right?" And she's like, "Oh," but I liked her. So it was like, you can call me Chad. I really don't care. But when I go to Starbucks, it's always fun to see what they do with my name. So the most common one is Chad. Like, I get that, like, whatever. Sometimes they want to spell it out like Shad, and so they make it a little bit longer. Or Shab, when I'm, looking particularly Middle Eastern. I don't know what Schmud is. I'm still, you just kind of look like whatever. Maybe I'm a Marvel's... I'm a Marvel 80s superhero. Or my favorite is the Austin Powers Shag. So again, I say that because you can call me whatever. I will turn around to anything that's close. But because I understand that the company started in Canada and it's a Canadian company, I did want to make sure that you guys understood that I'm not the rapper Shad, so I just want to show you this real quick.
Today we've been joined by the London, Ontario-based rapper Shad. He's nominated for this year's Juno Award for Rap Recording of the Year. He's had quite a year, and he's back in the Glen Gould studio for one more song. Welcome back, Shad.
That SK can shake clubs like car thieves or golfers. Crazy, compulsive, cold killers, so ill I'm giving competition also. These fears frenetic, poetic,
okay. So that's not me. Just in case anybody was curious, or like if you were confused, you're from Canada, I just found out about this yesterday, I'm like, oh, I really better explain that. So I will tell you that when they invited me to come talk, this is not the kind of talk that I normally do. Usually I'm giving talks and I'm talking to generals and I'm giving briefings, and they're very boring slides without a lot of pictures, and I'm trying to explain to people why this is important. I'm trying to tell people why we need to do a program, why they need to fund it, how if they don't do it, it's going to cause problems. But you guys are sim people. I mean, this is the best. Like, you guys have already bought in. I don't have to explain why you should do it. But what I want to talk to you about today is I want to talk to you about why you do it. Because sim people are fun. It's not just a job. Like, I couldn't get up and just do a job. This is something that matters. And sim people, they're invested. They're creative. There's this new world that keeps opening up, and there's so many cool things that you can do. And it's just limitless. And you're also willing to explain what you do. I mean, I have to explain it to my kids on a regular basis. I'll get up in the morning, and my son will be like, "Hey, Dad, are you seeing real or fake patients today?" And I have to think, I'm like, it's Tuesday, they're real. And he goes, okay. So, but you have to explain what you do, because people don't always get it. But that's okay. Now, I am from Oklahoma. I am from the middle of the Midwest, literally right in the middle. I'm the son of 2 teachers, which is probably why I really enjoy some of this stuff. For anybody that's familiar with the weather in Oklahoma, yes, there are tornadoes. Yes, I was in a house that was blown down by one at age 7, so I'm a real Oklahoman. And when I was growing up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I took one of those tests in high school. You take those tests where it says, here's your interest and here's what you'd be good at. Did anybody else take that test? Yeah. So simulation technologist is not on there. Just so, at least it wasn't. Maybe it will be someday. So apparently, when I took that test, I was supposed to be an airline steward. So just to get this out of the way, your exits are located here, here, and here. Put your seatbelt on like this. Okay. So So I didn't wind up becoming an airline steward. I did go to the United States Military Academy. They shaved my head because I said I was going to quit after I got there, but I refused to leave with a shaved head, and they kept shaving it, so I wound up staying. I decided I wanted to be a doctor when I was there, and I went to the Uniformed Services University. We call it America's Medical School, and I decided to do OBGYN. And I went to Walter Reed to start my internship. Now, I want to take a quick break from my story, and I want to tell you what the goals of my talk are. So here's what I want you to take away from it. I want to talk about the simulation cycle, because one of the great things, I was really excited to do this talk, because it gave me an opportunity to go back and reflect on the simulation and where I started and what I'm doing now and the why. And I want to talk to you about the cycle, because it's a predictable cycle that's in a lot of things. But I want you to just think about it. I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you because what you're doing matters, because simulation saves lives, and what you're doing is important. It's one of the most important things that you could possibly do. And at the end of this, I want you to consider why you do it, because it's the why that keeps you going. So the simulation cycle, it all starts with an idea. There's some core belief in you that believes that what you're doing is the right thing to do, and that it makes a difference. And then the next thing that comes is an obstacle, and there's always an obstacle. You kind of have to expect it. But if you can get around the obstacle, and if you can figure out how with an opportunity, then you can have influence. And the influence is different. You may be the influence for someone else. You may be able to help someone with an opportunity, or you may be able to influence actual outcomes. So again, this is the cycle, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So ideas. Where do ideas come from? Where's that core belief of why you do what you do? I don't know about you, but for me, it was a patient experience. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And for most of the people that I talk to about, hey, why do you do this? It's almost always a patient. And it's a realization that this is a great technology that has unbelievable potential. So what are some obstacles that get in your way? Because there's always an obstacle. A lot of times it's money, and you're trying to find funding. There's space. Hey, that's a great idea. We have money, we don't have space to do that right now. And then there's people. And let's be honest, there would be no drama if it wasn't for other people. So what are the obstacles that people throw up? So there's different ones. And if you really think about it, you can usually figure it out. So sometimes they're just scared. They're scared of change. Like, oh, that's different. We don't do it that way. That's different. Sometimes they really are just being a horse's behind. And it's just what they are. Those are harder. Sometimes the concept is just alien to them. They're like, what? What's sim? What are you talking about? Like being on a plane, I have great conversations with people. I really enjoy it. Or sometimes you really just do get grumpy cat. And again, it's challenging. People are challenging, and there's always an obstacle. But if you expect it, you'll do better with it. So why? So I want to get back to why. Why is the fuel? When you run into that obstacle, when you have the person that says no, here's what I tell people. They're like, why don't you get upset when there's an obstacle? I'm like, I just expect everything to go wrong. Like I do. Let's be honest. Sim, have you ever run a sim and it's gone exactly like you thought it would? No, me neither. So I expect the problems. I expect people to say no. It's okay, because I know why I'm doing it. And I know that if I keep doing it, I can find the opportunity, and in the end, I'll win. So what about opportunities? Opportunities, believe it or not, are the same thing as the obstacles. So money, funding comes available. People do get it. Sometimes a new space opens up. And people, in terms of opportunity, I wouldn't have accomplished barely anything without people that reached out and gave me the opportunity. So as much as they're the obstacle, they can be the answer as well. So once you get past the obstacle and you have the opportunity, then there's the influence. There's the chance to make a difference. There's the chance to improve patient safety. There's the chance to reach back and help others. And as the cycle grows, your influence grows and you have the opportunity to take care of bigger and bigger ideas. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to tell you where I started with simulation. And I'll be really honest, as I was putting together this talk, I've never told anybody this whole story. I've told pieces of it. But again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share it, because I've never actually put it all together. And it was really a lot of fun. So the idea for simulation, for me at least, started when I went to internship. So I was on call one night. I know this is nice and bloody, but you guys have already seen a trauma thing. I mean, you're fine. I was on call. I was an intern, and we got a call, said there's a hemorrhage on the postpartum unit. And I went running over with the second year, and we walked in, and this woman was literally just trying to bleed to death in front of you. For anyone that's seen a postpartum hemorrhage, Blood flow to the uterus at term is 500 cc's a minute. If you have an average of 6 liters, you can do the math. It's a stressful situation. And my second year walked in, and she was fantastic. I mean, she knew what to do. She knew what position to put the patient in. She knew what medications to give. She directed the room. There was community. It was amazing. And I was in shock. I was. And it's not because I hadn't read. I had read a ton. I'd read everything I could find on postpartum hemorrhage and what you do. But it was completely different when I was standing there in that situation. And I said, you know what? I got to learn this. And I got to figure out a better way to do it. And then it became more personal because about a year later, when my wife delivered our first child, she tried to bleed to death. And so it's one of those things I said, I've got to do a better job. But what I focused on was me getting better. I focused on making myself better and then trying to teach other people to use checklists and to go through stuff. But I wasn't at simulation yet. I knew that we had to do better. So I wrote a book because I said, I have to teach people how to do this. And then I decided to subspecialize in high-risk pregnancies or maternal fetal medicine because I said, I have to be better at this. And I chose to go to Georgetown University to do a fellowship. Now, when I was at Georgetown, I'd only been there about 6 months, so I'm the fellow, but I'm essentially the staff on call. And we were doing a delivery. And it's late at night. It's like 2 in the morning because everybody knows that's when babies like to come. And that's also when bad things tend to happen. It's always at night. It's always in the middle of a shift. And so we were working with a couple, their first baby, and I had a resident with me. They were excited. They'd been planning, and she got to the point where she was pushing. And she'd been pushing for about an hour. We're like, all right, Mom, you're doing a great job. Keep going. We're always joking around during like, hey, what are you going to name the baby? Do you have the crib ready? Just the stuff we do to try and take people's mind off the pain. And so she pushed and she pushed and she got really close. And the resident was like, good, Mom, you're doing great. And she pushed and the head came out and goes, okay, Mom, you're doing awesome. She put her hands on the head, said, one more push and we're done. You got it, one more push. And the mom pushed and she pushed and nothing moved. And then the resident just looked up at me and her eyes just got big and she said, it's stuck. So for anybody that's not an obstetrician, this is called a shoulder dystocia. It happens in 1% to 3% of all deliveries, and it occurs when the anterior shoulder gets stuck behind the maternal symphysis. It is an obstetric emergency. Just from this happening, the baby can have either a temporary or permanent nerve damage to the arm and lose function. And the other problem is at this point, the umbilical cord can be compressed and the baby cannot be getting oxygen. So you have a few minutes. You have a few minutes to do the right maneuvers and the right things in the right order and the right way to get the best outcome. And it's just this absolutely horrible feeling for anybody that has felt it before. When you have your hands on a baby's head and it feels like it's just stuck in concrete and it's not coming out and the baby is turning blue, it is a horrible feeling. So as soon as I realized what was going on, I moved the resident out of the way. I gave instructions to the nurses, did the maneuvers, and it feels like forever. Time just slows down when you're doing a shoulder dystocia. And it was really only about 2 minutes, but it felt like forever. And I was able to deliver the baby. And so in my arms, I'm holding this blue, limp baby boy, and I took him over to the warmer as quickly as I could, and the pediatricians were there. And then I went back to the parents, and they were just in shock because they've planned, they've thought, they've imagined this day. And this is nothing like what they thought it was going to go like. After a few minutes, and again, it feels like an eternity, time just slows down. I heard the baby cry, and everybody kind of took a deep breath. And then later that night, we talked. I got the team together, and we talked about shoulder dystocia. And I did the teaching stuff. I said, here's the risk factors, here's when it happens, here's the maneuvers you do, and we went over all that. And a lot of them had never seen one before. And then I thought about it, and what I realized that I did what was done to me when I was in training, and that is when there's an emergency, the person who's most senior pushes the other person out of the way, because you don't practice during an emergency. You take care of it. But if that keeps going, then the first time my resident is going to take care of a baby and have a baby's life in their hands, it's going to be the first time they actually do it. And I said, it's just not okay. So I applied for a grant. And I went to the hospital and I said, okay, I'd like to buy a simulator. I'd seen one in a magazine. I'm like, oh, it looks like a good idea. We might as well, let's try it. Let's just try it. I mean, it can't get any worse than what I'm doing, so let's just try. So I applied for the grant. And I got the grant, and I was really excited, and so stuff started showing up. Now, here's the thing. This is before Amazon Prime. All right? So boxes showing up at your house was a big deal. And my wife, who was a high school teacher, had taken a couple years off to stay home with our first child. So, and I'm working 80 to 100 hours a week. She barely sees me. So when this box shows up at the door, she's like, oh my gosh, he's thinking of me. So in her mind, this is what has come in the mail. So she opens the box up. So for those of you that are old enough to remember pages, it's like this. So I called my wife, and she's like, why is there a doll with its head in a bag at the front door? And being the supportive husband, I said, oh, the pelvis is showing up tomorrow. So again, good husband moment. But anyways, so I was excited. I was like, you know what? I really think this might work. And so I got the mannequin out, and I got part of a room, actually, at the hospital. I talked the department into giving me a room, and it was a small room, enough to have a bed in it that I could put the mannequin on. And then the other half of the room was actually a meconium study that was going on. For anybody that doesn't know or doesn't have kids, meconium is baby poop. So the room smelled awesome. And I got really excited, and so I was putting it together, and I spent a day putting it together and getting it all ready, and I got focused, and I didn't think, so I didn't put any clothes on her. So when the cleaning lady came in that night, it was one of these, open the door, scream, and then run away, and the room never got that clean after that. So I said, you know what, now that I have this, I want to train residents. I want to train residents, and I want to see if I can make them better with shoulder dystocia. I picked that specifically because of the things that had happened. So I called my mentor. I called my mentor up and I said, hey, here's my idea. I got a grant. I did this. I've done this. I really want to do a study. I want to see if this makes a difference. And I will never forget what he said to me. He said, Shad, you are wasting your time. He said, if you want to progress in your academic career, you need to go to the basic science lab. You need to do some clinical research. He's like, but you're not going to get anywhere doing this. And so I took a deep breath and I said, sir, thanks for the advice. I'm going to do it anyways. Would you mind helping me? And he said yes. And actually, believe it or not, he's actually the head of a simulation committee right now and the chair at another hospital. So he did. So here's the thing. He gave me the opportunity. He actually, even though he said no, he was willing to help. So we did a study, and we randomized residents to two different groups. One was the way I was trained, which is you got a lecture, you read a book, you had your clinical experience, whatever it was. And then the other, I brought them to my lab, and I practiced with them. I said, okay, here's a shoulder dystocia. Let's go over the maneuvers. Let's practice this. Let's practice the order. Here's how you do it. And then a couple weeks later, we brought them in to run them through, unannounced, a full-scale simulation with a husband saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why is the baby blue? Just all the stuff that really happens. But the morning that we were getting ready to do that, because the residents didn't know, we had a shoulder dystocia on labor and delivery. And so in morning report, we spent 30 minutes going over shoulder dystocia. And from the researcher perspective, I was like, I'm screwed. I'm not going to see any difference. We literally just went over all of this. I'm like, well, we're just going to do it anyways. So we did it. And you know what we found? Still a huge difference. So the people that we had trained on the simulator were able to deliver the baby in less than half the time. Less than half the time. And they were much more likely to do the 6 critical things that you have to do every single shoulder dystocia. It was huge. But you know what? That wasn't the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing is that when we finished the simulation, for everybody, we said, okay, simulation's over. The baby's fine. I want you to take a deep breath. I want you to tell me all the things that you should do in a shoulder dystocia. Forget about everything you just did. Don't worry about it. I want you to just list off, here's the things you're supposed to do. And then we compared them. And there was no difference between the groups. They were exactly the same. They had the head knowledge, but they didn't have the practical application. And that was the huge difference. So a couple weeks later, I was on call again. Bad things always happen when I'm on call. It's just one. See, some people have clouds, like white clouds, black clouds. I'm the tornado. So it just happens. And I was sitting at the nursing station, and a nurse comes running up and says, Dr. Deering, there's a shoulder dystocia, and they need some help. And I jumped up, started running down the hall, because it was another doctor's patient, but you always go help. And I got to the door, and a nurse came out and said, it's okay, the baby's out. And I heard crying. I said, okay. I waited around, and about 20 minutes later, one of the residents that I trained on the simulator came out, and she was excited. I mean, she was like, and we never walk out of an emergency like that excited. Like, it's like, oh, but she was pumped. And I'm like, how did it go? She said, well, the baby came out, there's a shoulder dystocia. Staff moved me out of the way, did a couple things, and he stepped back and said, it's not coming out. She said, I remembered what you taught me. I remembered what I did. And so I stepped in, did the next maneuver, and I got the baby out like that. And she was so excited. So it was, it was just one of those things where it was just a validation that, like, you know what? The aha moment that this really does work. So while I was at Georgetown, we actually kept doing studies. We kept doing simulation. We went on to breach, and the malpractice carrier for the hospital said, this is great. We should definitely keep doing this. So even without data at the time, they saw this, and they said, that's good enough for us. And we were able to keep doing research. So then my time there ended, and I had the opportunity, so I got to go back to the military, and I had a chance to meet with my consultant. The consultant is the person who tells you where you're going. They're essentially your assignments person. And so I went to meet with him, and he said, okay, well, Shad, here's the deal. You have a 15-minute appointment. You go and you talk to them. He says, okay, so we're kind of short on maternal fetal medicine docs right now, so I'm either going to have to send you probably to Hawaii or Fort Hood, Texas in the desert. Probably Fort Hood. I said, okay, sir. And I gave the military answer, which is, sir, appreciate the opportunity. I'll go wherever you need me. Yeah, that's what you say. And then I said, but you know what? I was reading some of your papers, because he had just done a study using simulation on episiotomy repair. And I said, I read your paper. I really liked it. Let me tell you some of the stuff that we're doing at Georgetown. And I went over and I told him. And so our 15-minute appointment turned into 45. And so I went home and I told my wife, I said, hey, so we're going to Fort Hood. And she was like, awesome. She's a good military spouse. She's great. And then 2 weeks later, I got an email from my consultant who said, I'd like you to come to Madigan. I'd like you to work with me out there, because I'd really like to push this stuff forward. And so he gave me an opportunity. So I went out to Madigan. As soon as I got there, they said, you're the chief of obstetrics. I think it's because I missed whatever meeting it was where they were assigning jobs. And they had a sim center. And it was the beginning of a sim center. But they had an OB simulator. So I went over and I started doing some training. They said, ooh, you look interested. You can be the deputy medical director. I said, all right, whatever. Then the medical director quit. And my boss, Colonel Roth, came to me and he said, hey, Shad, I'd really like you to consider being the medical director. I said, sir, I'm kind of busy. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I said, can I think about it? And he said, sure. And 2 days later, I had not gotten back to him yet. 2 days later, he sends out an email to the entire hospital. Congratulations to Dr. Shad Deering. Please welcome our new medical director. I was like, so I went home and I'm like, honey, I'm the new medical director. She goes, what? So I never accepted the job. I never did take it. But Colonel Roth was one of the true believers in simulation from the beginning. And what he would do is he would bribe people. So he goes, I will send you to the Harvard simulation course, but when you come back, you have to come and work in my sim center at least twice a month. So he would bribe people. And he knew that if he did it, when they came back, he knew he'd have them hooked. So we started talking about plans for simulation for graduate medical education. And what we recognized is, this is back in 06, 07, that even though it wasn't a standard yet and it wasn't required, it was going to become a requirement. And even if it didn't, it was the right thing to do. You also have to understand at this time we were deploying a lot of providers downrange over to Iraq, and so people were going and practicing outside of their specialty, and they were coming back and they needed an opportunity for refresher training. So we said, you know what, this is something we really need to do. So here's our idea for the Central Simulation Committee. We just came up with a name. If you come up with a name and say it enough, people will just keep saying it. I don't know why, but they do. We said we want to create and implement a standardized GME curriculum for resident education. We want to have a program so when people come back from deployment, they can practice. And we want to improve patient safety. So we had the opportunity to go, and we managed to go and present to the Surgeon General's Chief of Staff. We said, here's our idea. And I'll never forget, we're on a teleconference, we're sitting there talking, and he was a helicopter pilot. So he got it. At some level, he understood simulation. He said, okay. He looked around the room. There were 4 other colonels sitting there, and he said, does anyone think this is a bad idea? And I said, no, sounds good. He goes, okay, you're funded, have a meeting, come back to me with a full plan. So in 6 weeks, we put together a whole working group. We got a specialty advisor from every one of the core specialties, and we sat them down, and we said, okay, what's your core mission? What are the things you need to train? And then we said, what are the simulators you need? And then we said, okay, we have 10 training sites. We have different training sites. We have different training residencies at them. So if you have family medicine, internal medicine, you don't get 2 of everything, will overlap. And we came up with a standard purchase for every single specialty at every single site. And then we basically calculated that out 5 years for consumables. And we went back and we briefed that. And we briefed again, and we sat there, and again, it was the same thing. He said, all right, makes sense. You're funded. $2.8 million. We were excited. It was great. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And then he said, who's going to run it? And Colonel Roth was sitting there, and he put his arm around me, and I was a major, and he goes, this guy. So he gave me the chance. He gave me the chance to come up with the idea. He gave me the chance to present it. And then he supported me, and he said, this guy's going to run it. Again, it was one of those things where when you have the opportunity to push someone else forward, it's a great thing to do. So we came up with a mission statement. My original mission statement was 2.5 pages long, and my committee was like, no. So they're smarter than I am, so they really coned it down. So this is our mission statement. And if you get down to the end of it, we will ensure that our providers are trained, competent, safe, and ready. And that's what we try and do. Our organizational structure, we now actually have 15 different specialties that we cover. I'm still the CSC chairman. It's been since 2007, which, again, it's been such a privilege. We have specialty advisors. We have an administrator at every single site that is their job, and then we have simulation technicians at the sites depending on their volume and how much they do. We've grown, and one of the things we did up front is even though we are funded for graduate medical education, that's what we're funded for. When we were in the hospitals, we said, we want to integrate into the hospital. And when people came and said, we have nurses, we have this, we have that, we said, great. You have to bring your consumables, but we have the simulation technicians, we have the administrators, we have the space. We will do all of that for you. We'll help you. And so our training numbers have grown. So we now train over 54,000 providers a year, which, again, it's great. They're incredibly productive. We have over 100 research publications, over 200 presentations, and over $11 million in funding that we've handled since that time. And again, I could not be prouder of the team. But I'm an obstetrician, so eventually I had to I gotta get back to OB. I love OB just way too much. So around this time, as we're setting all this stuff up, there's more data that came out. And I love data. It's not what drives me. But I love data because it helps me go and make my arguments. So around this time over in the UK, they published a study on shoulder dystocia. And what they showed is they went a step further than what I did. And they said, you know what, if you train everybody on shoulder dystocia, then you can decrease your brachial plexus injury rate, that's the nerve injury, you can decrease it 4-fold. 4-fold. So let's just put that in perspective. So if this is 100 babies, I know they're cute. If this is 100 babies that are injured during a shoulder dystocia, and you do this training, all those babies in green don't have an injury. So I said, you know what? I have data. I'm going to go, and I want to do more training. So what I said is, I want to do training not just of the residents, I want to train the team. I want to train them on labor and delivery because 60% of bad outcomes in OB are basically related to communication and teamwork. And I need to train on labor and delivery where there's the facilities issues, the systems issues, the actual teams that work. That's where I want to go. I want to improve patient safety on the unit itself. I even did a cost analysis. I said, look, I can build one of these mobile OB emergency simulators for $20,000, and the mean payment for one malpractice claim is $2.5 million. I mean, I've got data. I've got this. I'm thinking, man, this is easy. So you remember what I said about obstacles? So I went through the malpractice carrier for the military. They were not interested, which I was a little sad about. I applied for a grant. They were not interested. And then I was actually doing a Team Steps trainer course, and the head of patient safety was there, and I chased her down at lunch and at the cafeteria, and I was like, hey, I have an idea. And we started talking, and she goes, that's a great idea. And so they funded us. So again, they finally, and actually then we were able to get more funding from AHRQ to do this. So here's what we had to do. There were a few obstacles in the way. We had to actually rebuild the simulator because we didn't want the motor. We didn't like it. So we bought it, took the motor out, actually had to create an eclampsia module because they didn't really exist, so it would actually seize. And then we had to build all of them. And then we had to bring people to train. And so this next slide, I'm going to tell you, you guys are cool. That's why I put this next slide in. Like I actually had it, I didn't have it in there. Yesterday morning, I went and I saw everybody. I'm like, all right, they can handle this. So when we were making the eclampsia modification, we actually took the mannequin apart and we sent it to a company. We designed it and said, here, put this in. And so they said, so I get this email like, here's the video link, see what you think, see if this is a good eclampsia simulation for you. So I said, so I emailed them back really quickly. I said, guys, this is awesome. I really appreciate it. You've got to put some clothes on or you can't send that to my military email. I said, you were going to get me in trouble. So we had a lot of fun doing this. And so we were actually given money to bring people to train. We trained a doc and a nurse from every single hospital, all 54 locations in the Department of Defense. And then we gave them the equipment and they went back with it so they could train there. And then the Army took it. I didn't know they could do this, but the Army took it and they patented it and they actually licensed the product. These are all the places that it's in place in the United States. I let every one of them name their own doll too. It was pretty funny. They came up with some great ones. This is where it is in Europe. I keep telling people I still have to go inspect these locations, especially the ones in Italy, but I haven't made it there yet. And it's over in Asia as well. And then some of the places, they went above and beyond. So they took what we did. They took the equipment and the basic training. Then they did crazy stuff. So there's always the drunk driver car at a military base that they put out on holiday weekends, and they put it out by the front gate with a big sign that says, "Don't drink and drive." So at one of the places, actually out in Kansas, they took the simulator, put it out by the drunk and drive car, and then called 911. And then they watched it, and they had to go from point of injury with a mom that was bleeding and put them in the ambulance and bring them back. And again, it's so much fun to see all the stories and all the things that people have done with it. We were asked by ACOG soon after this. ACOG, again, this is back in 2008, said, you know what, simulation really seems to be something that's kind of pushing forward. It really seems to be something that might be helpful. And so they asked us to do a course. And we said yes. I got a few staff together because we'd already been working on this, and we went to New Orleans. Now, how many of you have ever traveled on a plane with a simulator? How many of you have gotten those really weird looks? So I'm dragging a full-body simulator up to the counter, and I get it up there, and I give them my first bag, and then I put it up there, and the woman looks at me, and she goes, "Sir, it's too heavy." I said, "Well, how much too heavy?" And she goes, "It's 2 pounds too heavy." I said, "That's okay. I can fix that." So in the airport, you know how you do? You sit it down, you kind of like, you open it up, and there's all these people around, and you're like, I hope they don't. Okay. So I kind of opened it up, and I took out some forceps, and I'm like, okay, so let's just put these in my other bag, and it'll be fine. And they're like, your other bag's gone. So what do you mean? They're like, oh, we put it on the conveyor belt. It's gone. I'm like, can you get it back? They're like, no. And I'm like, I'm going to miss my flight. So I said, well, you have to find something else, because there's no way I'm getting through security with forceps. So I put the forceps back in, and the only thing I could take out were the 2 naked delivery babies. So I'm standing at the counter, and the woman's she's taking no pity on me. She goes, you can take it over to heavy baggage. I'm like, fine. So I'm walking through the airport like this with 2 naked babies and the thing, and I come around the corner, and the guys at heavy baggage, they're just cracking up. They're like, and one guy goes, "Sir, your children are naked." I said, I know, they're not. He goes, it's fine, just put it back in. Okay, so I shoved him back in. I didn't have to take him on the plane. And then I get to New Orleans, and it's hotter than anything, and I'm dragging it through the streets, and I get on the elevator, and there's this mom and her 9-year-old son sitting there, and she just looks at me, and I'm pouring sweat and with this body bag, and she looks at me and she goes, "So what's in the bag? Is it a body?" And I looked at her, and I'm like, "Yup." The kid's eyes are like this. So again, we ran the course. It was really fun. We ran it for 2 days straight. It's exhausting. I don't suggest it. We've cut back to 1 day, but it was great, and it was really the beginning. And we've actually run this course every year since. So then I had the opportunity to deploy, and I got to go over to Iraq. And so yes, that is me with a weapon. It's not Texas. Apparently you're allowed to do this in Texas now. What they told us when we were over there, they said, if people start shooting, please don't help. I said, just get down, let somebody else do it. It's like, okay, fine. But when I got over there, we were looking at the state of women's health. Now, I was deployed as an OBGYN, so we're belly surgeons. That's just what we do over there. We did deliver 9 babies. That was actually the highlight of being over there in terms of being able to do part of my job. But we looked at maternal and child mortality. And what we found, perinatal mortality was the highest in the region because all the doctors had left and they didn't have trained midwives. And we said, you know what? Maybe we could take what we learned back in the States and we could apply it here. So we called it the Mo's Eye for Iraq, and we took it and we actually converted the curriculum. We came up with a more basic training course, and we somehow got it shipped over. And if you want to have fun, try and explain putting one of these things into an armored Suburban to go do training in the middle of a combat zone. Especially, I mean, we put a helmet on her. I mean, it was fun. Like, we had a good time. And again, we were able to do simulation training while we were over there from what I do. And then in the middle of my deployment, we actually switched over. So my team was a bridge team, and so whereas the 86 Cash was there, they'd been there for 18 months, they were leaving, and the 10th was coming in, and there was this transition. And as the new people came in, the new group came in and taking over from a very experienced combat support hospital who had done amazing things, they were like, how do we transfer that information? And the new people came in and they said, how do we do this? And so they came and they asked me, and you know what I said? You want to do a sim? And they were like, yes. I said, all right. So we set up a mass casualty simulation in the middle of a combat zone in the combat support hospital, and we practiced. And so the old team that was there was able to run the new team through and teach them all of the things, everything from patient administration to where the patients come in, to make sure you disarm them before they come through the door, kind of things. All the important things that you just don't know when you show up. And then I got to do the debriefing, which was, as a perinatologist, was quite entertaining. So then, in terms of influence, so then when I got back from deployment, not too long after that, I was given the opportunity to come back to the East Coast. So I left what I called Evil Empire West, and I went out to the East Coast. I went to the Val G. Hemming Simulation Center, which is at the Uniformed Services University. I had the opportunity to become the Deputy Medical Director and the Assistant Dean for Simulation Education. And really, I came out on purpose, because a lot of things we've done with the Central Simulation Committee, I wanted to put into the bigger DoD framework. And honestly, if you're not on the East Coast and you can't walk into the offices and you can't see the people, it's difficult to do. It also gave me the opportunity to work with national organizations, and so I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the ACOG and the SMFM simulation committees. And again, we've been able to do a lot with that, and it's very exciting. I also was voted the chair of the Federal Medical Simulation Training Consortium. And so this is a collaborative group of the leadership of medical simulation within the DoD, the VA, and federal. It's chartered, not under anybody, but it's a collaborative group, and our goal is to share a curriculum to talk about it, because honestly, medical care is the same. It doesn't matter if you're Army, Navy, Air Force, VA, you should train an OBGYN resident the same way in all three of them. Now, in terms of being closer to the flagpole and being on the East Coast, I'd only been the chair of this for about 2 months when the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health Affairs came on a visit to our sim center, and he said, what's going on with MedSim? I said, well, sir, we've been working on it for a few years. We have this FMSCC. Here's what we're doing. And he goes, we need to fix this. Come to my office. So when the 3-star says go to your office, you go to the office. So I went in, and he said, here's what we need. We need an enterprise solution for medical simulation for the Department of Defense. And we're going to create a working group to do that. So I get to do that as well. The first thing I wanted to do is say, okay, what's going on in the DoD? Where are we? And so I sat down and I made a mind map. So that's where we are. We've been working at this for about 18 months, and believe it or not, we've made a lot of progress. So in the last 18 months, we are one signature away from having the part 1 done, which is the requirements generation process and documentation standardized for this. So we're one signature away from that. The next step is the organizational office that will sit within Defense Health Agency Education and Training that will oversee this. And then the next step is exactly what we train and goes through that. So we're 6 months into the second part. We're one signature away from the first part. And again, we're very excited at the opportunity to really keep this moving. And again, it's been really fun to reflect and to just think about all the places that we've been able to affect simulation across the world. So let me get back to my final point. And this is really the basis of the entire talk, and that's why. Why do you do it? I started asking people. I always ask people, but I started asking people, and these are some of the answers I got. To better educate young doctors. To give all patients access to the best healthcare providers. Maternal mortality and morbidity are a problem, and SIM can be part of the solution. You can tell that I talk to OB people. And then to save lives is another one. So let me tell you why I SIM. Because I've told you all my story. You guys have heard it from beginning to end. But if I can put it just in a really short synopsis, I do simulation because I believe. Because I believe it's imperative that if you can train on something other than a human, that you need to do it. That if you can train and you can improve outcomes in real life, that you need to do it. Because it's really hard to do healthcare and sleep at night. when you think that there's anything that you left on the table, or there's anything that you could have done that you didn't. So I sim because I believe that it makes a difference. As much as I love data, and I've told you that, I love the letters. I love the stories. I love the people that come up to me and they're like, hey, I took your course and here's what I did. This is just one example. And this was a nurse who we did an NRP drill, and then they had an NRP event about a week later. And I love her honesty, because what she says is, the experience and feedback during the mock code helped me stay fairly calm. There's no such thing as complete calm in the middle of that chaos, but you can be fairly calm. She said, I was able to help the team time compressions and ventilations all the way through to intubation. Again, these are the stories. These are the things that keep me going. And this is the simulation cycle, just to get back to that. It starts with an idea. It starts with the why. You will hit an obstacle. You just will. And once you get over that and there's the opportunity, then there's the influence, and it continues to grow. So here's what I want you to do. This is my challenge. I want you to embrace the idea. I want you to think about why you sim. I want you to expect obstacles. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. It's okay if there's obstacles. Just expect them. I want you to look for the opportunities, for how to get around them, for how to get through them, because then you get to the influence part. And when you have that influence, go to the next idea, or reach back and help somebody else get over the obstacle that they're facing. Now, on your chairs, you have a card. It does not have my name on it. Okay, this is meant to be something for you. And here's what I'd like you to do. When you have a minute, I want you to write on there why you sim. Why do you do it? Because when you run into the obstacles and you get frustrated, and you will, it's okay. We all do. It's nice to be able to go back and to remember why. If you have an idea, write it on there. If there's an obstacle or an opportunity, put it on there, and then just hold on to it. And when you get frustrated and you struggle, look back at it. Let it remind you of why you're doing what you're doing. Or if you put an obstacle on there and you get over it, look back at it and be like, yeah, I remember that. So in the end, for simulation, every one of you is doing something that's amazing, something that's important. And my final word to you is I want to encourage you to always remember why. Thank you.